Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of All in the Name of Growth. I am really excited about this episode today. I've actually been waiting for a couple of months to be able to get our special guest on. We've had some scheduling conflicts, mostly on my part. So I'm just really grateful also for her patience. So today we have on Melissa Mittelstaedt, and she is a financial coach. And we have had on a couple of different coaches that talk about money and things. And I'm really excited to get her take on just finances and money, and especially and in particular women and finances, because I think that there's a little bit of a disconnect there for some women. So Melissa, welcome to the show. Thank you for your patience. I'm excited that you're here.
Thank you. Yes. Patience is kind of what we all need in this moment, isn't it?
Oh, it really is. It really is. And I just appreciate yours. So I'm really excited to be able to dive into this. I know that for me, money has been a huge thing in my head over the years. So I grew up in a home where we didn't have a lot of money. My mom was a single parent for most of my growing up years. And then she remarried and we had a little bit more money. And our situation was different, but it still wasn't anything that I just felt like I kind of left home with some money, I don't know, blocks, if you will, if that's what you call them. And I wanted to go into business for myself. And there came a point where it was like, how do I wrap my brain around charging people for my services and making sure that I'm getting a fair pay, a fair wage out of, and I don't know, it was just this kind of back and forth thing. And I also, in my own experience, came to a point where, there's a lot of emphasis, at least on when I was growing up, that money is evil, it'll make you evil, like this kind of mentality. And so I was always concerned that in pursuing my own business and becoming, having more financial abundance, that it was going to somehow ruin me. So I would love to we're going to get into those topics, but I first wanted you to kind of give a little bit of background on how you became a financial coach, like why this, and I love that you're a woman too, because I think you can come at this from a unique angle. So why financial planning or financial coaching?
My background, my trade is actually in sign language interpretation, and I have been doing that for the last, 15 or plus years. And COVID hit, and I, like everybody else, really on the planet, was like, what can I pivot to? What else can I do?
Yeah.
And I went through my own pretty significant debt-free journey. I came out of college with over $47,000 worth of debt, student loans. I went to college in that time where you would go and at student orientation, you could get a free pizza for every credit card you signed up for, or a t-shirt or whatever. Like, that's the era that I'm from. And so when I got out of school, I got my first real job, and I was spending like I was used to spending. And I realized pretty quickly that I did not have enough money to cover what I owed. And so that was, a lot of crying, a lot of tears. And I kind of worked my way through that. I was able to pay off all the debt in about 3 years or so. So I looked at that experience. I was like, oh, I would love to be able to help people through that, because it is a rough road.
Yeah.
And if you can have somebody to guide you through that. And so I started as a financial coach, and I got, probably 6 months into that. And I met somebody who's a fantastic friend of mine now. And she was like, but what kind of certification or accreditation, or are you a fiduciary? And that word to me, a fiduciary, like I didn't even know what that meant, but what it means is being able to put your client's interests first. And I was like, no, I don't have any of that. So then I decided to go and get my financial counseling accreditation. So I took that test last June, and I've kind of been working my way through that ever since. But I still go by financial coach because I come from it with a coaching lens, with a counseling education, financial counseling education.
I like that. I really like that a lot. I think that it brings in that real world experience aspect of it, instead of just somebody preaching from their like soapbox, right? That it's like, it's less soapbox and more like I've been in the trenches. I already know what that feels like and I got myself out. So I'm going to show you how to build your ladder to get yourself out too, right? Like, and I really love that aspect of a lot of coaching. It's one thing to be able to say, well, I was educated in this way from an educational standpoint, and it's a whole other ball game to say, this is my experience in life and here's how I did it, right? And I think that coming at it from that angle also gives people hope that, you didn't have it all perfect from the very beginning, that you created a way to make it right, and to become financially free in that way. And it gives people hope to be able to do that themselves in their own lives. So I love that. I mean, some people just want all the accreditation, and I want to know that you actually know what you're talking about, right?
Yeah. So I definitely try to combine the best of both worlds.
Both worlds. Yeah. I like that. Okay. So as far as the women aspect of it, let's dive into that a little bit. Why do you think that it is so common for women to struggle with setting a fair wage for themselves and really going after the things that they want from a financial perspective? Why do you think that's such a hindrance, or why women very commonly have blocks when it comes to money?
Because culturally, we haven't been taught how. You look at surveys, like in 2015, Fidelity did a survey. I'm going to just look at my notes here to make sure I'm getting the numbers right, but 92% of women said, I want to learn more, but then 80% said, I refrain from talking about it. Well, we want to learn more, but we're scared to talk about it. Then we look at 2017, Merrill Lynch, they did a survey. 61% of women would rather talk about their own death than money. Talking about death is a tough topic.
Isn't that incredible?
Incredible. And then we look at 2018, Acorns did a survey. 68% would rather discuss weight than money. And so we haven't been accustomed. There was another survey that I looked at that said of like 1,600 articles in women's magazines, less than 1% talked about finances. Like, it's talking about clothes, it's talking about weight, it's talking about hair products,
Products, right?
Yeah, but where are we talking about money?
Which is really interesting to me. And I guess when you look at past generations and you think about the circumstances that a lot of women were brought up in, it wasn't like they were required to get a job and bring in money, right? Like, because they were supposed to be the homemakers or whatever. There's a disconnect that happens in my brain though, because for my generation growing up, and now all the generations since then, it's a lot of times it's been a 2-income household, right?
Yeah.
So women are bringing in money, yet they haven't been given the same financial training that maybe swims around in the circles of, primary care, or, primary providers, as far as like a men's, historical role of what they, provide for the family. That's really interesting that women would prefer to talk about their own death or about weight or any of those things than they would. And that in magazines, I mean, you can guarantee that in men's magazines, they're talking about money, and in women's magazines, they're not. That's really, really interesting to me. I think that one of the things too that I've learned is that women, so I had heard from another guest that most women who look at a job description, for example, they look at a job description and they say, okay, these are the requirements for a job description, and I only have 80% of those requirements. They're like, I'm not qualified for this job. But a man will look at it and be like, I got half that. I'm there, like that's how and so I think that there's just a different mindset when it comes to women, that when it comes to money, I don't know if it's that there's still enough women who aren't working, which I can't imagine that that's it, because like literally almost every woman I know is working, right? In some part, whether they have an Etsy shop or they do something on the side or they have a little hobby business, or, they're doing something to bring in money, yet yet they're not being taught how to be financially wise with it or
Right.
invest it, or how they can turn $1 into $1,000, or,
Yeah.
any of that kind of stuff. That's really, really interesting to me.
Yeah. And there are, of course, money communities where women can get together and they can feel open to talk about it. But if you're not asking your family members, if you're not asking your friends, if you're not comfortable being the first one to say, okay, I want to partake in this conversation, who's starting it?
Yeah.
Like someone has to be willing to say, all right, let's get going on this, because the more women talk about it, then wage gap changes. The amount of money that we now have investing, that increases. And so it really is just taking people who are willing to be the first ones to speak up and say, I'm ready. I want to talk about money. Would you be willing to do this with me?
I love that. And I love that you're one of those people that has raised their hand and said, let's talk about it, because I think it gives women a safe space to be able to say, it's like that thing that you had said in the beginning about women who want to learn, but they don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
It's like you're giving women a safe place to learn and talk about it. And I think that
Yeah. And I think another piece of that puzzle is a lot of women want to talk about something when they feel educated about it. They feel confident about it. They feel
right,
like they have
when they've
something to
got that
share.
90%.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
It's like I might want to talk about it, but if I don't feel like I'm in the know, then I'm going to be more hesitant. All right, well, great. Let's get people in the know.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. How do, in this conversation, I know that this is true for some men as well, because I know that that's true. This isn't just a women exclusive issue. So this crosses the borders, but let's talk about really that, like, kind of creating a healthy relationship with money so that it is
Mm.
something you feel comfortable talking about it. How do you feel like somebody can initially even kind of take that first step?
I love when you were first talking about your money journey and you had said, I grew up in a household where um, like it was maybe not seen much and definitely not talked about much. And you said you used the term blocks. Like I obviously had money blocks from my childhood. And I think recognition is our very first
Hmm.
step. Uh, I say to people, like, if you have had zero beginning in really kind of thinking about your relationship with money, that's how I like to frame it, is what's your relationship with money look like? If you have not even thought about that, then step one would just to be like, do an emotional journal. When you spend money, what does that feel like? Does it give you anxiety? Does it make you happy? Does it make you sad? Does it make you scared? And just kind of, even if you're writing a smiley face or a frowning face or whatever, but just do some sort of check-in acknowledgement to say, when I spend money, what does that feel like? When I receive money, what does that feel like? When I spend money on things that I love doing, if it's going to the movies, what does that feel like compared to paying my cell phone bill? What does that feel like? So really just bringing the acknowledgement to the surface is where I like to tell people to start that journey.
Awareness is a great place to start. I love that you actually gave that tip, because I think it's true. Awareness has to be there for anything, any significant change to be made, right? You have to first understand where you're at. And it's funny, as you were going through those questions, I was thinking about when I was a kid. I started working when I was 14. I had my first job when I was 14. I worked for a catering company and I loved getting a paycheck. Like that was like rolling in it. And then my grandparents owned a hotel and they were going to get rid of all their old TVs and buy all new TVs. And so I was like, I'm going to save up $50 and buy myself one of their old TVs so I can have a TV in my room. And like that was legit. I wasn't even
Yeah.
16 yet. And I, had a TV in my room. And I mean, that was back in the day, right? So
Yeah.
that was a pretty big deal. And it's interesting though, when you were talking about, how do you feel about spending money on going to the movies versus on paying your cell phone bill, or, like for me, it's totally like, I'm definitely here to spend money on vacations and create memories. I'm not here for possessions, right? So I have a really hard time buying crap. Like I hate shopping, especially clothes shopping. That's like the bane of my existence. That's why I do hoodies, because they're easy. Um, but yeah, it is. I love that you gave that tip first, because I think that it will bring to people's the forefront of their minds, like, what are my blocks? Do I have blocks? And what does that feel like? What does that look like? And how do like you can't fix something you refuse to acknowledge.
Yes. Yes, 100%. I want to just touch on something that because clothes shopping hates it, vacations loves it. That when we get to the heart of value-based spending, like making sure that we have money to spend on things that we value, that is when we up the ante. Like people can create spending plans. Yes, that's obviously great. But when you can like highlight something in that spending plan that you love and that feels like the right way to spend your money, that is when you can that is when you can really kind of like feel the humming going with your money. You're like, oh yes, I'm spending on things that I love doing instead of things that I resent.
Yeah, I've never heard that term before, value-based spending. I love that. That hit me right in myself. It was like, oh yeah, that rings true because I think it's really important, and I've touched on this in other episodes about people really understanding what their values are
Mhm.
and being able to lead their life from a place of like their value set of, what's
Yeah.
important to them. My family's important to me. And so being able to create memories with my family is really important to me. And, like there was a time span, almost 2 years that we were traveling in an RV and,
Mm.
all packed in this little RV together. And it was the best. And I still, my youngest was around 4 at that time, and he's 11 now. And I can't tell you how often he says to me, can we just like go traveling again? And just like, it's a value that I've instilled in my people because
Mhm.
it's something that we all recognize creates those memories and that you can call upon that feeling, and that's what a lot of people, I love coaching in that when you're setting your goals, really getting down to what the feeling is you're trying to create. And I love that, when we look at that from a financial aspect, what is that feeling you are creating, right? Like, are you regretting your purchase after you go like clothes shopping, or do you really love those clothes, or are you just like trying to therapeutic spend, or like what's
Right.
happening? Why are you
Yes.
spending it?
Yes, exactly that. There are some people I'll walk through their budget with them and the first thing they'll say is like, I need to cut back on going out to eat. I know that I go out to eat too much. And then we'll walk through their budget and it turns out like going out to eat is their favorite thing to do.
Yeah,
And I was like, so is that where you really want to like take this big hit? Like, let's look at some other things. Maybe you spend more than you want on hair products and that's not as important. Or maybe you spend more on the gym when you could go to maybe a cheaper gym or something like that. But people often have this idea where it's like, oh, I spend too much money on X, Y, or Z. But it's like, well, let's really look at, because if you're spending money on something you don't value, then of course, right? Like, let's look at
right.
that piece. But if it's something that you love, maybe let's not start there.
Oh, I love that advice because I think that a lot of people feel like their life when it's almost like this diet mentality, right? Like we're supposed to cut out everything we love and be miserable in order to be healthy, right? Like that there's like this gigantic sacrifice that you have to make in
Mhm.
order to have the life that you want. But is that the life you really want? Right? Like, and
Yes.
how it is with money too. I totally get that what you're saying about, and I think it's because most financial planners would say, oh, you need to cut back on, your eating out when you need to. But really, when you look at the kind of life overall that you're trying to create, if that is something that, you're going out with friends and that's your form of connection, or you're going out with your spouse and that's your form of connection, or you just are a foodie and that's like a freeing thing for you. I don't know, I,
Mhm.
I definitely value that mindset though, that helps people understand that we don't have to cut out the things that we love the most in order to create the life that we want, because is that the life we want if we're cutting out the things we want the most?
Exactly that.
Kind of an interesting dynamic. I love that you said that. Okay, so let's get into budgeting a little bit.
Yeah.
Like let's talk about a debt elimination technique, or something that people can implement into their financial plan. And I love that you've already touched on that a little bit. So let's go a little bit deeper into
Sure.
how you teach people how to get out of debt, kind of what you did.
Yeah. So there's varying techniques that people can use. Obviously, knowing your numbers is kind of the place to start. So if you have debt that you're looking to either get completely paid off or at least reduce so it's more manageable on a monthly basis, first and foremost is to know kind of your overall spending. So if you haven't tracked spending, then my recommendation would be to go back a month, go back 2 months, and really just kind of look at, okay, where is your money going? Knowing the numbers is the first place to start. Some people will get real detailed and create, a spreadsheet and have all these categories. Other people will just lump it into buckets. Then they'll say, my housing expenses are this, my essentials are this, and kind of be more broad about it. So really you can kind of take whatever approach makes sense for your personality, because people who try to get real detailed and that's not them, then that really just is like, nope, I'm not doing that. And it kind of like puts a stop to the process. So that's where to start, is to really know your numbers. Then second, I would move into creating a spending plan. So what does that look like for you on a monthly basis? And there's various types of spending plans. You could do the line items, you could do the buckets, you could do what's called an anti-budget, which means you know how much you need for all of your essentials, and then everything else is the money that you have left. I mean, a variety of budget approaches are out there. But my number one tip in that is to use what's called a zero-based budget. And that is essentially assigning every dollar to something. Because a lot of people will say, I don't know, I spend about $3,500, and then that extra 500 just kind of like I do whatever with, right? Disappears. Exactly. That's exactly what I always have. They're like, I don't know where my money went, but when you assign it, and whether that's assigning more towards the debt elimination, assigning more towards savings, whatever that looks like, but actually giving every dollar a job. So that's kind of the zero-based budget would be my like ultimate recommendation of what the next step would be. And then there's a couple of different methodologies when it comes to debt elimination. One is called a snowball and one is called an avalanche. Why they picked wintry terms,
I don't know.
Beyond me. But a snowball is saying, I'm going to look at all of the debt that I have and I'm going to document it smallest to largest. So let's say I have a credit card with a couple $100, a second credit card with $500, student loans with a couple $1,000, and a car loan. And I'm going to detail that out smallest to largest. Well, I'm going to pay what I can to that top one and the minimums on the others. So that way I'm putting the largest chunk of change towards the top one. When that's paid off, then I get to take all of that money and apply it to the second one. Minimums on the rest. When the second one's paid off, you take all of that and apply it. So you can imagine this snowball just like picking up steam. So when you get to that last debt that you're paying off, you've got the largest chunk of money to just like start hammering on that. So that approach works for people who psychology wise, like need some quick wins. Like they want to get excited about watching that happen. The other approach is the avalanche, and that's where you list them out with highest interest first to the lowest interest. Because some people say, I don't want to waste more money on interest than necessary. I want to tackle that first. I don't care if it has the most debt or not, but I want to get rid of the highest interest first. And so really it kind of depends on what philosophy feels right for you. Do you want to get those like quick wins and get rolling? Or do you really want to save as much money as possible by not paying more interest?
That's really, really good and really, really helpful. Great tips. So for us personally, what we did, my husband actually years and years and years ago, because we wanted to get out of debt, he went through and created a spreadsheet. And in that spreadsheet, he lined out literally everything. I mean, it wouldn't be like we would have like a groceries category, right?
Sure.
Or like a gas category. But all of our other expenses, as far as like what we pay on our electric, what we pay on our gas, like everything is literally line itemed out in a spreadsheet. And And it does, we try and zero it together, right? So anything that we aren't spending on bills goes into a category of this is kind of what's left. So we know what we have to do with, either to put it into savings or to apply it to a credit card, or, whatever
Mhm.
that looks like, put it in towards a vacation,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. So, and it has been life changing for us to be able to, it also makes it faster when I go to pay bills, that I'm like, okay, I know all the things that I have to pay. I don't have to keep track of mail or
Mhm.
emails or any of that kind of stuff, because I know what I have to pay out every month. And so
Yes.
that has been really, really helpful. It's that acknowledging part of it, right? Like they
Yep.
just being real about the numbers so that you can make it your friend instead of your enemy, kind of a mentality. But and I love that there are different ways of being able to do the actual debt elimination, because like you said, for like psychologically, for some people, they need those wins, and other people, they need to feel like they're actually saving money and that they're not
Yep.
just bleeding out excess, right? So I
Absolutely.
think that both of those approaches are really great and super valuable. Um, so for people who, I'm just going to give a tip on, one of the things that we do is we just have a Google Doc,
Mhm.
like a Google spreadsheet, and that's where we keep track of all of our stuff. So I can access it on my phone, or I can access it on the
Yes.
computer. And for a lot of people, I know that it might seem a little bit daunting to go through initially, and that's okay. Like it might take you a couple of hours to go through your bank statements and to kind of lump everything together. And we just do grocery and eating out all in the same one. It's kind of like our food budget.
Yep.
And then our gas all, goes into one. So, but being able to itemize out all of your other things, your credit card, student loans, house payments, all that kind of stuff, it makes it easier moving forward. Like you're setting yourself up for success because you already kind of came to terms with what that looks like.
Yeah.
And so you're like, okay, well, I am actually seeing that I should have an extra $500 every month. So where's that money going, right? And then you
Mhm.
can get real about it and be like, oh my gosh, I can apply that to debt, or I can apply that to whatever. Or maybe I can give myself a little bit of eating out money, or, like that you can
Mhm.
give yourself rewards, or you can be like, oh my gosh, no wonder why our credit cards aren't being paid off, because we're upside down $500 a month every month, right? Like
Right.
you can't fix what you don't acknowledge, and you can't figure out also what you don't acknowledge, like you can't create those wins if you aren't even like putting yourself in that position. So
Yeah.
love all of that, love all of that. Okay, so let's go to from less of a practical spreadsheet, this is kind of a thing, let's go into the mindset aspect of it and kind of wrap up with that.
Yeah.
Just some tips as far as the mindset aspect of it goes. I know that, psychologically we are humans and we have feelings, and a lot of times those feelings run our world.
Right.
And so if we can't get on top of the way that we feel about money, then doing a spreadsheet isn't going to do us any good.
Right. Yeah, yeah, that's so true. And real quick before we transition into mindset, I wanted to just touch on something that you mentioned. Oh, why is that thought escaping me? I'm hoping it comes back. So if that comes back, I'm going to
Yeah, jump back on
divert
over.
for just
Yep.
a moment. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So money mindset tips. First, and my ultimate favorite and simplest ever is what's called arigato. And that means to thank your money.
Mm.
And there was a book written called Happy Money. And it was all about, I think it was like millionaires and billionaires in Japan. Like, how did they get to the space that they were? And it all boiled down to thanking your money. So when you spend it, we thank it. When we get money, we thank it. Because oftentimes people they get excited when they get the money, but then when it goes out, people don't have that same emotion. But the point is, we need to have that same emotion going both directions. And
Yeah.
really thanking our money can just change that.
Yeah, the gratitude for having it to spend it.
Yeah, exactly. The
I like it.
gratitude to have it, to spend it. Okay, so that's tip number one. Tip number two is creating a money mantra. I love having a new money mantra that I put up whenever it like feels right. So like right now mine is money flows easily to me.
Mm.
I don't want money to feel like it's hard. I grew up with that mentality, like hard work equals being able to get paid. I Not that I don't believe in hard work, but I don't want that to be my Like
Association.
association, right? Exactly. I want to be able to say, money can flow easily to me. I can have passive income. I can wake up in the morning and be like, oh, look, money got deposited from this book that I'm selling or whatever,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
having that, creating a money mantra that just like feels right. And of course, if you Google money mantras, like a million will show up.
Sure.
So you can find one that feels right for you. Next, I would say money dates. And this has really kind of changed the game for me. I used to do money dates solo. I would just sit down and I'd be going through my budget. And now my husband and I do them together on a monthly basis. But we'll, get a favorite bottle of wine, we'll get our favorite music going, and we'll set an agenda to be like, okay, what do we need to talk about? Upcoming birthdays that are on their way, or upcoming larger expenses that we have, or just kind of taking a look at our budget to be like, are we on track, or whatever that is. And then getting ourselves just like in this really good mood to talk about money, have like a reset
Wow.
about it. And you're really just kind of taking a peek at like, where are we in this moment? Are there things we could improve on, or are we crushing it? It just kind of really
Yeah.
gives you a chance to level set. And I've loved doing money dates. So if you
And
haven't tried that,
start it from a place of like happiness rather than like, oh, this is going to be horrible,
right.
like, yeah, I love that. The mentality in which you just set the mood for the conversation and the task at hand. I think that that's valuable.
Yeah. And sometimes it's the fake it till you make it. Because when you sit down for your first money date, you might not be like, yes, this is awesome. You might be like,
We're winning.
okay, like here we go, here we go, but like fake it till you make it, like put on a song you like to dance to, or put on some, like do something that kind of gets you in that space,
Yeah.
and then start the date, even though it may be hard to begin with.
Well, I think that there's so much value in that because it really is like there's one thing to sit down and go over your bills and be like, okay, here's the reality of the situation. And there's another thing to go into it and be like, okay, this actually gave me hope
Hmm.
that I can change my outcome, that I can make it different. Even if it's bad right now, I at least acknowledge it for what it is. And now I can see a roadmap out.
Hmm. Hmm. Yes. Yes. Seeing a roadmap, feeling that sense of relief, getting like, oh yeah, I'm making progress, all
Yeah.
that good stuff.
Yeah.
And then just finally, I would end with just knowing that money is energy. Sometimes we give it all this power, right? Like money is this overarching controlling thing, but really it's energy, and what we give to it, that's what we can control.
Yeah. You know what I find really interesting, even in that aspect of it, and I was talking to my husband about that actually this morning, because when for a lot of the population, okay, we're kind of divided, right? You either grew up in a city or you grew up kind of more rural, right? The cost of living in those places are very, very different.
Mhm.
And the wage you can make in those places are very, very different. And so what you feel like you have to create in life is very, very different.
Mhm.
And we were on a vacation in California. We went to Newport Beach, and that is a very affluent kind of area, right?
Yep.
And we were there, and we're from Utah, where most of the state is more rural, less city. And so we grew up, well, I grew up in Wyoming, so it was even like I was like out in the sticks. So even more rural. Um, but it was interesting to me to drive down, like the shopping districts and stuff, and to see like the dealerships for, really expensive cars. And um it was just interesting to me to realize that people in California have houses on the beach, and they can afford those houses on the beach because when they were growing up, they knew that they had to make a certain income level in order to afford
Mhm.
that, because that was the box that they grew up in,
Yeah.
is that, I have to create at least this much money. And so I have to get creative enough to be able to bring in that, or I have to get educated enough to be able to bring in that kind of a wage where I can afford, a $2 million shanty on the beach, right? Like, I mean,
Yes.
these are like, a lot of these are really small and they are really expensive. And And then there are people who, like in my area, a $2 million house is almost like a mansion, right?
Mhm.
So it's just like this mental place of understanding that what you've been raised with is only one perception of what it actually is, right? Because if you were raised in California or raised in Dubai or raised in India, like they're so different. And I think that a lot of people allow themselves to stay boxed into a mentality where that energy of money
Mhm.
means this, when they're, the estate over money means this, and that's their reality. And in a country over it means this, and that's their reality.
Yeah.
And I guess my whole point is just to draw the attention to the fact that what story you've created, what energy you have given to money is a byproduct of what you've been raised with,
Yeah.
but it doesn't necessarily make it all true. And that when we break outside of that and look at it from a different perspective or somebody else's reality, it's like, oh, well, wait, what am I missing by not incorporating more of that reality into my reality?
Yeah.
Right. So
Mhm.
I remember one time, this is just side story here. Um, when we were traveling, we had rented out my mother-in-law's basement so we could just keep some of our things there, like my boxes of books and, things I was not going to get rid of when I was like downsizing.
Yeah.
Um, and there was a time where we were just spending some time there, like we were parked with the RV there, and the cost of living there in just where she lives, it's in a very, very small town. And so the cost of living is very inexpensive there. And, my husband had looked at wanting to buy property there. And I was like, hold on. My concern about this is that if we adopt the mentality of really rural living
Mhm.
and we decrease our income, because you don't have to make as much if you decrease your income to that level, it's really hard to then increase it to something else, right? And we
Mhm.
had already increased it to something much more than what we would need to live there. And I was like, I don't want to backslide mentally on what money is and
Mm.
that kind of like energy of what it is. And I'm not saying that it's not possible to go from where you are to where you want to be. I just recognized how hard it was because we had already gone from where we were to where we wanted to be. And I didn't want to backslide. And I
Yeah.
knew that like the environment around us was going to affect the way that we viewed what we needed and what we wanted out of life. And a lot of those people, they don't go on vacation and they don't leave their small town. And, so it's more of that thing of what is the life you're actually wanting to live. So even when you're looking at your budget and you're looking through and you're saying, okay, well, this is how much money I make and this is how much money I spend, but this is how much money I want to be able to spend because I want a different house or I want a different car or I want to go on vacation or I want, other things in my life. Then I love just that energy part that you're talking about, is that you need to raise your own energy to equate the level that you want to be at, rather than just saying, okay, yep, I have enough to pay my bills every month. And that's, I guess that's where I am in life. It doesn't have to be. You don't have to stay there. You can say, okay, this is where I am and this is where I want to be. And so I'm going to raise my energy level to meet that productive place and start thinking, how can I bring in more money rather than how can I keep cutting back expenses, because there's only so much you can cut out.
Yeah. There's only so much you can cut out. And the way you kind of talked about you not wanting to backslide, or if you were to move to a different place, there are obviously societal pressures around money. And so then if now you're the family in this space who's got all this money and you're going on these elaborate vacations and you're driving these fancy cars, then all of a sudden that societal pressure can kind of push
Yeah,
it a little
right.
bit. And not to say that you can't make that successful, because you certainly can, but
Sure.
just be mindful of that. And some of those people who would say then like, oh, money's evil, or that, like all of that can kind of creep in. So I think you're right. Like you need to figure out if where you're at energy wise is working and it's successful, then great. But if it's not and you want to raise that, then take a look at what will take to get your energy level up there.
Yeah, yes, exactly. I think that that's really, really important. I know that, there are a lot of people who want to create something else for their life. But because they won't ever get real about where they actually are right now, it's really hard for them to see a way to get anything else because they don't even, like, again, going back to your very first thing, in acknowledging where you're at right now. And I think that, put it like Mr. T says, knowledge is half the battle, like you have to understand where you're at in order to get somewhere else. And that goes for yourself, that, I mean, you are the person who creates that outcome, right? I mean, you're the person that changes your financial situation.
Absolutely.
Cool. Awesome. Melissa, that was great. I loved your gratitude, your mantra, your money dates, the energy aspect of it. I think that those were really, really valuable tips. I mean, this episode is worth re-listening to just to get all the little nuggets out of it, because you talked about a lot of really great things. So is there anything else, any last thoughts that you wanted to share before we jump off?
Yeah, I think I'd just like to say that just like take a breather and get honest with your money, right? Take a look at that relationship and decide where you are. Are you at the beginning of your journey? Then that's fine. If you're in a space where you're ready to up level, then awesome. Like, make steps to do that. So I just encourage everybody to get honest and talk about money.
I love it. I love it. So where can people, if they want to talk to you about money, where can they find you?
That was a good tee up. Nice job. That was good. I'm Melissa Mittelstaedt, mostly on Instagram. My handle is @_Melissa Mitt.
Awesome. Okay, perfect. And I will make sure that all of your stuff is in the show notes and in the YouTube descriptions and stuff too, so that they can find you there. But awesome. I so appreciate, again, you like being patient with me, but also taking the time to come on the show and to share your knowledge and your experience that helps people. Like I said, it gives people hope that they can change their own lives, and to be able to talk to somebody who's been there and done that. And I know what it can do to have a coach in your corner saying you can do this too, because I've already done it, and it wasn't like any like miraculous thing. I'm not like Superwoman or anything. So we can do this together. I just appreciate you stepping into this space, into the financial space as a woman, and giving that value for other women, especially in particular, because I think that there's just so much there that needs, so many conversations, obviously, that need to be happening that aren't happening. So kudos to you for what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you. I love doing it. So it all works out.
I'm glad. Awesome. Okay. Well, thanks again. We'll catch up with you later.
Thank you.